North Carolina has some, I believe, inside Carolina reports on just how much their roster cost being put together this offseason. And maybe you can lay this out better than I can, actually. It was an inside Carolina report that
Yep.
alludes to a $14 million number for this roster. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was something along the lines of like sources had confirmed to them it was over 14 million. And it seems like that number started to make its rounds. I know Goodman retweeted the report and said that it was over, I think either at or over 14 million. And it's thrown some different fan bases up in a tizzy, so to speak, Greg. And it's funny. Can I just have a moment here? It's funny to me because last year it was like, oh, UNC's broke. They can't afford a center. And now they spend too much money and everybody wants to be mad about it. Sorry, we're rich.
Well, well,
Sorry, we're rich, G.
okay, you're handling this the right way. When you have a $14 million program, you absolutely should demand a moment. So good job on you there. I think the disconnect here and Goodman's reaction, which reflected my natural reaction, and I think everyone's natural reaction that isn't a North Carolina fan here, is looking at your roster, we all still thought you were poor. So how do you go from like you assembled a roster that looks like you are poor to no, we actually spent $14 million on a roster that just does not require $14 million. Is that a fair assertion by Goodman and me and everyone here?
It is a fair assertion that it probably did not require $14 million. It is not a fair assertion to say that you look at this roster and quote unquote, you still think we're poor. And with both of those things considered, Greg, you know what? I would spend $14 million again on it just because we can.
Who got the $14 million here though? So okay, but you're right. Let's kill the North Carolina is poor accusations. That's fine by me. Not
Hey,
poor. Congratulations.
I'm leaning into it a little bit because I'm honestly pulling a you when you were like, yeah, we spent $5 million on Yaxel Lindebor. We would do it again just to show that we could, even if he stays in the
Yeah,
draft.
but that's Yaxel. Like that, I'm looking for where the Yaxel is. Is Kyan Evans your Yaxel?
No, I think like Henry Vasar's our Yaxel.
Oh my, the guy that averaged 9 and 5?
Okay, you can't just like box score watch with Henry Vasar.
We can box score watch with the whole team. Pick one.
Dude,
Jared Stevenson averaged 5 and 3. Did you pay him $3 million?
I don't
Like,
think we paid Darren Stevenson
seriously,
that much.
seriously here. I okay, I'm sorry. But I'm gonna do the exact response Goodman did here and try to have a real conversation about this. If you spent $14 million on this roster, it's crazy. If you had $14
Yeah.
million to spend on this roster, you are like 2 stars short of what you should have spent $14 million on. Presumably, like if that's a real number, it's a top five spend in the sport. I don't think there are five teams that
Hmm.
spent $14 million on a roster. Michigan did not spend $14 million on their roster, even with Yaxel in the fold. So, again, no disrespect. I have North Carolina as a top 25 team now. They snuck into my mid 20s when we did our update here. And I
Yep.
think you're going to have a good season. But like Jaron Stevenson, Henry Vasar, Kai and Evans, Jonathan Powell, Jaden Young is the transfer class here. That is not possible to add up to a $14 million roster unless you spent like $4 million on Trimble or Bogovac, or I don't know how much it cost you to get Caleb Wilson in the fold. But I don't think any team on earth except for BYU is spending on high school kids like that. So I guess how does the math work here to add up to $14 million?
Yeah, yeah. I'll be a little serious here because I did want to take my moment to gloat that we have money.
Yes.
Yeah, I again like my take on that is like it's not my money. You know, I'm not a booster. I'm not writing the NIL paycheck and there's no salary cap. So on one hand, it's like who cares? Spend it if you can. On the other hand, like yeah, I would say I look at this roster and I'm like this does not look like $14 million well spent. I'm really high on Henry Vasar. I think he's probably the highest paid guy. He and Bogovats are probably like at the top of the list. And then beyond that, I think Caleb Wilson got compensated rather handsomely. I think those are your three, the three who got the highest price tag. I think they spent a lot on Kyan Evans based on the point guard market. And that to me is like where I would give the most like pushback to, yeah, this is not a $14 million roster. When if you spent high seven figures on your point guard, you probably would have liked to end up with one of Rob Wright, Donovan Dent, Jacoby Gillespie. Like that's that tier that you I think if this was the budget, you probably should have been at that level.
How much
Um,
did Kyan presumably get?
didn't Goodman say it was like upwards of 2 million?
I don't know. I might have missed that if he did.
I thought Goodman might have said that on like a Field of 68 stream. I saw someone was tweeting about it or posting about it.
I mean, it would
Or
make
you-
like if this roster totals 14 million, I would assume Kyan got at least two. But that's
yeah,
also like again, point Cadeau got 1.2 at Michigan. So Kyan Evans is getting $1 million more than Elliot Cadeau, and that's how North Carolina is spending their money. Like it's Kyan Evans.
yeah. I think he's probably the biggest overspend on the roster when you put it in those terms. However, like part of me thinks that some of this is like the tax for playing for a coach who's on the hot seat. Like I think Carolina probably had to overspend on these guys to get a quality roster because it's not like, I mean, okay, look at the best point guards on the market. Silas Demery signed up to play for Dan Hurley in UConn. Like that's a perfect system fit. He's a two-time national champ. I get it. Like I would get if he's even making less than Kyan Evans. Like that kind of hurts me a little bit because I would love Silas Demery, a Raleigh native, in Carolina Blue and Argyle next year. Gillespie getting recruited by Rick Barnes, a guy who goes to the Elite Eight every year and might finally break through and is like a shoe-in to finish top 10 in a system that the past 2 years has featured a ball dominant player who's allowed to just go get buckets. Like again, I get that. I get why Gillespie would choose that. BYU is kind of the fun new up and coming team that has crazy money to spend, and that makes sense with Rod Wright as well. The one outlier is like, man, we really couldn't have like outbid UCLA for Donovan Dent. You're telling me Donovan Dent was just like dying to go play for Mick Cronin? Like that's the one where I'm like, okay, come on, someone in Carolina help me out here to where we didn't have to settle for Kyan Evans. Because like I love Kyan Evans the player. I think it's kind of a bit among UNC fans that the only Kyan Evans highlights, like the only Kyan Evans TikToks are him against Memphis in the NCAA tournament when he hit 6 threes. Like I see all these UNC fan pages just popping up with like Kyan Evans Memphis TikToks, and it's like, yo, he played more games than that. Like, let's get some more highlights circulating. But that being said, like the way he carried himself in that game, I remember watching it and just being like, dude, this kid is a killer. But I would still like Kyan Evans as the killer, like third guard, maybe not my lead guard. The guy who's either coming off the bench or playing next to an alpha, which maybe
Yeah.
that's Luka Bogovac, but yeah, it still feels like an overspend. I'm fine with spending big on both Caleb Wilson and Henry Vasar after watching like G. You know who my front court was last year?
Yeah. Yes. I hear
Like I watched 30 plus games of Jalen Withers, Jalen Washington, Vin Allen Lubin, and Cade Tyson and Ty Claude. Like give those two whatever they want, you know? Like I think Vasar has a ton of potential even left to untap and can be in the NBA one day. Like he's the one to me where it's like if you're going to criticize the overspending, don't criticize it on Vasar when it's like a really slim market for big men anyway.
I hear you. Maybe I have to tap in on Vasar. Again, I'm going off numbers I heard from what Michigan spent. Michigan got Merez Johnson and Ade Mara for less than 2 million each. I am looking at the North Carolina roster here, and again, respectfully to the names I'm about to name. Isaiah Dennis, Derek Dixon, James Brown. Is it fair to say those guys didn't need big money to come to North Carolina? I think you landed
Yeah.
those guys off of being North Carolina, right?
Mhm.
So that leaves literally, you take those guys out of it, presuming they're probably making some money, but they didn't need to spend to be part of this $14 million budget and sign up to play. You only have 8 players. There's only 8 guys besides those 3 who I don't think like needed a price tag to come to Carolina. So if this is a $14 million roster, cut off 1 million of it, say that's going to the 3 I just mentioned, whatever.
Mhm.
You spent 13 million on 8 guys, almost $2 million a player for Kyan Evans, Seth Trimble, Bogovac, Stevenson, Vasar, Powell, Wilson, Young. Like Caleb Wilson being a $2 million player, fine. I don't think anybody's spending on high school players like that right now, except for DeBonsa and Peterson, which I guess Caleb Wilson's not that far off. So okay. Um, Vasar, if you want to talk me into the value there, fine. You spent more money on him than Michigan spent on both their centers.
Hold on. Are you saying that did Merez and Ade Mara get 2 million combined?
No, they both got less than 2 million individually. They're in the ones,
So they were both in the ones.
both in the ones.
Okay. So yeah, if let's say Vasar got, I don't know Vasar's price. Let's say he got 2.5. Merez and Mara both might have gotten like 1.25, right?
I think Merez was around 1.6. I think
Oh,
Mara
okay.
was around 1.2. But like
Uh-huh.
again, is Vasar worth double a day Mara? Like,
I kind of think so.
okay, maybe I'm asleep on Vasar. I'm open
Look,
to that
so
possibility.
I here can I my thing on Vasart is like just because I know people love to accuse me of being a homer in the comments, even though half the time all the UNC fans tell me I'm too harsh, so whatever. But Vasar, like I watched a ton of Arizona this past year. Vasar was terrible in the non-conference, flipped a switch in league play, and it was every time I watched an Arizona game, I was constantly impressed by his defense, by his playmaking, by like even the athleticism, how angrily he dunked. Like I was a Henry Vasar guy before he signed with UNC, and I just need that on the record that this
Yeah,
is not just like Carolina blue tinted glasses, but I'm like super high on this kid's game.
it's totally fine to believe in him. I'm just like, look, I I like the roster again. I'm just kind of baffled even North Carolina people like want this report out there because I think it
Yeah.
suddenly puts a bunch of pressure on the team, the players, the coach, everybody here. Nobody would have suspected this roster was worth $14 million. Now all of a sudden you tell the world it's $14 million. If you have a bad season, this immediately goes back in your face, which maybe that's what Inside Carolina wants anyway. Maybe they're like, you know what? Let's put a little extra pressure on our head coach because we don't really want him here. That's speculation. We can have that conversation if you want to. But the point, like, if you spent $14 million on this roster, I think you would agree with me on this. You could have ended up with most of these guys, maybe minus like the Bogovac late ad, which obviously we like. He's great. Or maybe take out one of the other top five here. You could have gotten a Yaxel, or you could have gotten a shit. I'll bid for DeBansa. If you believe the reports, BYU gave him $7 million. If you have $14 million to work with, why didn't you give DeBansa $8 million, spend the other six on three of the guys you wanted here, and tell me you wouldn't feel so much better about this roster? Like, I am not understanding where the star is if this actually is worth 14 million. And
Mhm.
respectfully to Vasar, that's not an answer I'll accept for the centerpiece of a $14 million roster. Caleb Wilson might be, but
Mhm.
again, what teams are spending for high school seniors like that right now? Even that feels like an overpay if you're telling me Caleb Wilson got $4 million to come to Carolina. This video is brought to you by NBA 2KLab.com. 2K Lab worked with us last summer as well. They're one of our favorite entities in all of sports gaming. We want to show you their college basketball stadium locator challenge game. And I'm going to share a screen right now as we do this. South Carolina, bang. Oh,
Ooh,
okay, that's pretty good. Next, North Carolina. Why are we only getting the Carolinas?
please
Bang.
lock in.
St. John's, that's New
New
York.
York.
Bang.
Where's New Jersey?
We're on fire. Colorado. I actually don't know what state Colorado is.
It's in Colorado. There's a state of
Is that
Colorado.
this one?
It's to the right of Phoenix.
Anyway, you get the picture. This game's really fun. They've got more games as well, like Guess the NBA Player, Mystery Fantasy Draft, and more. Stay tuned for all of the college football content and games that they'll be putting together to help you get the best experience out of college football 26. Back to the video.
I just think they probably just have like several 2 million guys or over 2 million. If you're looking at like Kai and Vasar, Wilson, Luca, let's say that's 8 million right there. Six, and that's like your 4/5 of your starting five, give or take another million for Seth Trimble. What is that? 9 million. So then you have like
Where's
five
the
million
other
for your
5 mil going? You see what I'm saying? Like the prices you just laid out, I'm fine with. But then you got 5 million more that's going to Jonathan Powell and Derek Dixon. Like,
Yeah,
go get Yaxel with the other 5 million.
I
Like,
guess that is a good point,
Cart,
G.
I just called you Cart because this is like some shit Cart would try to defend with Michigan State. Riley, you're Carolina. If you actually have $14 million, where is the stud? Where's the All American here? Right?
Yeah, okay. I will concede these are some good points. And to my credit, I said at the top, I understand that like you look at this roster and don't think it's worth $4 million or $14 million.
Sure.
I think like in order for it to be even somewhat, in order for it to be justifiable, you need one of Luca, Caleb, or Vasar to become like fringe All American, if not straight up All American.
That's
If
possible.
if that happens, you look back at this, it's like, oh yeah, who cares? Like $14 million well spent. Like it, but everything this year has felt like a gamble. It was a gamble to bring Hubert Davis back for another year, you know? Like I feel like there is no more fitting way for Hubert to go into like a pivotal year 5 with this roster that's like high variance and I think does have a pretty high ceiling but a pretty low floor. Like so that to me, I don't know. There's just some the whole uncertainty of Hubert's future, like hanging over the team, just coming off of a really bad year where they were 14 and 11 in the middle of January. Like, I mean, there's part of me that's like, you look at a team like Kansas State that still spins big and doesn't seem for the results to matter. I like to where, like, do they really matter? Does it matter that much that UNC is coming off of this down year? That's what I'm led to believe, though, is there's something here where there's some disconnect between this. There's some disconnect with the program and like various players, agents, or camps, or whatever that led to them needing to overspend for a couple guys.
Yeah,
That's
that's
just
fair.
again, that's just like my theory. That's me hypothesizing a combination of like players knowing what's up to where UNC really underachieved last year and knowing the volatility of like the Hubert Davis tenure so far to where it's not like when Roy Williams was there and there were just high caliber future pros lining up to play for him, you know? Like
Yeah.
it's just Carolina right now. Of course, you can't take away the history. I think it still has the prestige, the brand and everything, but like it's hasn't exactly been on top of the sport the past 6 years. With even though there's been a couple highs sprinkled in there, the past 6 years have not been up to UNC standards. Like no one's going to argue that. That dates back to like the last 2 years of Roy's tenure as well. But yeah, that's where I think it's like it. I still think it's Carolina because I love Carolina. You still think it's Carolina because you're my age and you grew up when Carolina was dominant.
Carolina.
Yeah, and I still think that stands true, but I just to an extent, but there's probably just still some of these younger guys or current players that's like some of that mystique is gone right now just based on recent success or lack thereof.
Yeah, that's fair. Look, I completely endorse and agree with you that overspending is a good thing. Genuinely. I don't mean to imply that it's not. If someone comes
Hmm.
to me like, you spent too much on that roster, I'll be like, yeah, I'm rich. Hell yeah. Sorry. So it's the right approach. Just in sum, there's a difference between like you overspent for one player and you have a top 5 budget in the sport but a top 25 roster.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think that's a good way to tie a bow on it, honestly, Greg, is like right now there's this team is so far from a lock to even be into the second weekend, much less the final four.
Yeah. Last question for me. Ian Jackson, Drake Powell. Did you want those guys back?
Did me personally, or did UNC want them?
Carolina.
I think Carolina. I know, like Inside Carolina had reported. I
Powell,
don't know.
yes, right? Like that
Yeah,
one's
I
not
think they made.
questionable.
Yeah, I would guess they made like a big financial offer to him. I know like Inside Carolina's reporting was consistent that like they expected Powell to go, but they would gladly welcome him back and like had the resources ready to make that appealing. Ian Jackson to me is the piece where I'm like, dude, why? I don't know if there was some sort of falling out with him and the staff or what, because I said this during the season. I didn't like the way that Hubert utilized them down the stretch. I sent you numerous voice memos making parody songs about how Ian was just standing in the corner instead of more involved, and it drove me crazy to where I don't know if there was some trust that was eroded there to where the price tag didn't matter as much and he could go get probably 2 million from St. John's and it's evened out or whatever. But yeah, like to me, I would rather have I would rather have spent on over Ian Jackson than Kyan Evans.
Yeah,
Uh,
presumably Powell you had budget for, wanted, and then when he left, you used that money on Luca, which is a great pivot. No one's denying that. We love Luca. We've done videos talking about that. But I just come back. If that $14 million number is true, to me, even if you loved Vasar, that was the approach. Stevenson, you saw something in. You knew you were going to get Trimble back. Could you not have built this exact same roster for $14 million, but instead of Kai and Evans and Luca, paid to keep Ian and Drake? And then you're looking at Ian Jackson, Seth Trimble, Drake Powell, Jaron Stevenson, Henry Vasar, Caleb Wilson. You could have had that 6 players for $14 million, guaranteed.
would
And
you
I just don't buy it.
if you were in my shoes, would you rather have Ian and Drake or Kyan and Luca?
Ian and Drake.
How close is that in your mind?
Not close.
Okay.
Where are you at? You swing the other way?
Ah, given the choice, I think okay, so here's like I would say in a vacuum, Ian and Drake. I think Ian is the highest upside guy out of that group, even more so than Drake. As a fan, like this is completely my fan bias weighing in. There's part of me that would have had some trepidation of going through this past UNC season that felt joyless almost from the opening tip against Elon to the final whistle against Ole Miss. I would have some trepidation being like, okay, we're going to run back three of those main contributors with Seth, Ian, and Drake and just hope it works out with a better front court, which maybe it would have. Maybe that's what you need is just like some legit bigs to take away, like take the pressure off of them.
It's
But
fair. I still pin a lot of it on Cadeau. And I know that's my point guard now, but like I don't know. I to me, just talking as like a national non-North Carolina fan, if that exact roster, but with Ian and Drake instead of Kai and Luca was the roster, I think we're all looking at Carolina as the top 7 team in the sport.
yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right.
And that's if 14 million's real. I think you had the money to do it, is all I'm
Hmm.
saying. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I guess to actually do the ball on it, do you think it's real? You think this is $14 million spent?
I do, yeah. I think Inside Carolina is like the most reputable UNC source. They've been at it for decades. Like, very, their whole thing is like unbiased journalism, like big J journalism. I respect their work a ton. So, yeah, I think it's real.
Why do you think they reported this? Like my
I,
little conspiracy thing has to be a miniature part of this, I think. Like
I don't see the thing with I know some of the folks who work with IC, great people, and I know they like take so much pride in doing like the true journalism, unbiased angle. Like they're not content creators like we are. They're like legit
yeah.
unbiased journalists to where I would really struggle to be like, oh, they wanted to pump a certain agenda out there. I don't really think that's their MO. I think it was probably just like
It's
this
just
is
not like they didn't have to report this, right? Like it
mhm,
kind of became the headline news of the day.
mhm.
And it I feel like again, I agree with you. From what I've seen of Inside Carolina, they're phenomenal. So to me, like they would be aware of how this would be received if they make that public information, right? And
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. It's just interesting because this could have we could have entered the season without this being said. No one would have thought twice about it. But now it's like,
Mhm.
whoa, Carolina. You know?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would just say like because they are independent, you know, it's not like the Go Heels is the official UNC like PR department or whatever that is like ran by the university and generally has like more of a happy spin on things. To where I could see maybe Go Heels or something wouldn't want this to be put out there to get the perception that it's not, you know, worth it or whatever. Whereas IC is just doing like the investigative journalism side of thing, I guess. So that would be my expectation with it, I guess. But
All
yeah.
right. Well, thank you for your context clues, I guess, here. Carolina will be an interesting team to watch this year for sure.